So once again, thanks for having me. I am Scott Hunter, one of the two Scotts. So it sounds like you have the other Scott again in a few months. I've been at Microsoft since 2007. I was a huge ASP.NET programmer before I joined Microsoft. And today I was going to go do a couple of the demos we did from the longer build session, because we recorded 2 sessions of build this year. We recorded a 30-minute, which was really 20 minutes of stuff, and then we recorded a full hour and a half. I was going to go through a full version of that. I do have a treat today, and maybe I'll even do the total wrong thing as presenter, and I'll start with the treat demo, which is the one that we did not show at build, because unless I have like a room where I can actually talk to the people, it's too early to show. But I might wait to the Maui section to talk about that. But anyways, let me do this. This is, when I joined Microsoft, we basically could do desktop and web, and we've added cloud, mobile, gaming, IoT, and AI over the last couple of years. People always ask, it's the funniest question I get is, how many .NET developers are there? We're actually going to announce that in a week or two, but I'm not going to do it on the meeting here tonight. But we shipped .NET Core in 2017. It shipped in 2016, but the Visual Studio tooling did not show up until March of 2017. So we've been out for a little bit over 3 years, and we're about 1.5 million developers at this point on Core. People might not have seen this slide's actually now a couple weeks old. Stack Overflow had their 2020 developer survey. And ASP.NET Core was one of the most loved web frameworks. It was the #1 most loved web framework, and .NET Core was the most loved other framework. So we were 2 #1s in that survey. Another fun one for me is we really open sourced .NET starting around 2014. With a culmination of shipping .NET Core in 2017, and that's pretty late to the game for .NET or for a project, and we are one of the fastest moving open source projects, which is I'm very proud to say that being that late into open source that we're doing well. We're the top 5 language on GitHub. We're 7 times faster than Node.js. That is using the Tech and Power benchmark. That's not one of my benchmarks. And we're doing a bunch of work that you're going to see in .NET 5 to make the numbers in .NET 5 a lot better. And the crazier one is a lot of the new people to .NET, we actually have surveys when you download and use the product. A lot of new young bloods coming in with students. Fix that. The real thing about the health of .NET is, we're 18 years into this framework at this point, or this technology at this point, and we added a million developers last year. And 1 million developers for us is not that you downloaded the product. It actually is we are looking active developers, which means you're using the product multiple times per month in the Visual Studio family. And so I think adding 1 million people 18 years in is pretty good, and we've been on track for the last couple of years. We're adding 1 million a year. Of that 1 million, 600,000 of those were .NET Core developers. And so very good health metric on .NET Core. And when we shipped .NET Core, one of our goals of it was to be open source and cross-platform, and the amount of .NET Core we're seeing on Linux is just amazing, with over 1 million people running our command line tools to actually build Linux images with .NET Core last year. So that makes me very happy. This is kind of a general pitch to people is, .NET Core 3. We shipped it in September of 2019, and it had an LTS in December of 2019. It's the fastest adopted version of .NET ever. As somebody that's been around .NET for a long time, and somebody that still sees the statistics of how many people are on .NET 3.5 or 4.0 or 4.5 or 4.7 or 4.8, .NET Core 3, within a little over 6 weeks, 75% of all .NET Core customers had already tried it, which is kind of unheard of in our space. And that's what we want. We want people to come along with the ride and come with us faster. This was a fun thing to announce, which was Stack Overflow completed their migration to .NET Core 3.1 just a month or two ago. And my favorite part of this was one of the tweets by Nick Graver. When they first got it running on 3.1, some of their tests to actually make sure that the health of Stack Overflow is okay started failing because the site was returning so fast that the test thought that was a failure. And so they had to go redo their tests because of how much faster the system was actually displaying pages, which is something we see across the board. We have a variety of services inside of Microsoft that have moved to .NET Core and seen these same types of benefits. We have things like Azure Cosmos DB. I think they saw their memory usage drop by 25%. The PowerApps folks have some of their backends on some .NET Core tech, and they saw latency drop by 25%. So pretty much anytime somebody moves to this new stack, we see a big benefit. For build, we wanted to primarily talk about what was new shipping with Visual Studio 16.6, and then we kind of dive into what's coming next. And so there was three big things that we announced at build. One is we finally released Blazor WebAssembly. So Blazor 1.0 shipped in September of last year, and that's the Blazor server version. And so in Blazor server, it's actually, people are always excited about WebAssembly, but I think Blazor server is actually super compelling as well, primarily because it's one of the lightest weight spas you can ever build. So a Blazor application is basically an ASP.NET Razor-based application, but all the pages are rendered, as a spa application. Blazor server renders the page the first time on the server, and then as you click stuff on the client, we basically have a signal R channel back to the server, and we have it re-render the change, and we send the diff back and forth. And so you can end up with very, very small, much smaller than you could ever build with any large JavaScript framework. But Blazor WebAssembly is exciting because it's what enables us to let you run .NET live in your browser. So whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Edge, or the mobile variants of those on the various devices, all of them support WebAssembly. And we say that it gives you full stack web development with ASP.NET Core. You can write your backend in C#. You can write your front end in C#. That C# in the front end will run natively in the browser. And because of this, it enables us to let you build completely progressive, web applications with full offline support. And so at Build, one of the demos that we did was we showed a check-in app for like a rental car facility, where when the car comes in, you look at the license plate, you put it in the system, you put the mileage in, the application can run completely offline, and then as soon as the network comes back up, it'll sync back up again. And so that's now available in the latest .NET Core 3.1 SDK, and if you download Visual Studio 16.6, you get that automatically. So super excited about that. WinForms Designer. So we just shipped WinForms and WPF with .NET Core 3 in September, and then a lot of folks are like, desktop apps? We all build web apps. We still have millions of developers per month building desktop apps with .NET because it's so you can build apps so fast. The .NET Core support for the designer has been slowly coming, and so in 16.6 it's behind a preview flag, and it's enabled in 16.7 preview 1. We just shipped preview 2. And with preview 2, we kind of rounded out the rest of the controls that we're bringing to the designer. So pretty much the full WinForm designer is now in 16.7 preview 2, and when 16.7 RTMs, the designer will fully be there. The next piece for us, the only piece missing at that point, is going to be third-party controls, and those are coming pretty soon too. And we can finish that work stream off. And then we shipped at Build a year ago ML.NET. ML.NET is a machine learning AI library for .NET, and it was actually tech that we use in Microsoft for a bunch of stuff already. So if you do Windows Hello to sign into a laptop or a desktop, that's using ML.NET. If you've ever used PowerPoint and it recommends themes and stuff to you, that's using ML.NET. It's littered across a bunch of stuff, and we decided to make it available to all of our customers. Now, I'm not a huge ML expert, and one of the cool aspects of ML.NET that we have in the toolchain is we now have something called Model Builder, and Model Builder lets you actually use ML.NET without a lot of knowledge. So for example, you get a screen like you see on the screen here. You choose the ML task you want to do. You feed us some data, and if necessary, we can actually take that data and upload it to the Azure cloud. Then when that's done, we can download the data and give the model to you, and you can basically have a full running app using ML.NET in a very short period of time. And we might do a demo of that today. I didn't start that before we got here. And so, we land in a place where we're kind of at is .NET Core 3.1 is out. It's got long-term support. It's got WinForms and WPF support. It's side-by-side. It has self-contained exes. You can build a WinForm app that does not even depend on having .NET on the machine at all. It's got modern web UI with Blazor, and it's got a bunch of cool C# 8 features as well. And so we think we're at the tipping point now where if you're a .NET developer, any new app you build should be on .NET Core 3.1. So that's kind of our build message is now's the time to come. We have a bunch of partners that have helped us out, both in the case of WinForm controls, WPF controls, and Blazor controls. And so check out the websites for any of these companies. They're all out there with some awesome tech. Now, the big thing that we want to talk about, and I think the most exciting part for me, this is something that's been part of I wanted to do since I came to Microsoft, which is we want to unify .NET. If you look at where we are, I made a joke that I've not done publicly very many times, but I'll do it with you folks. We shipped the first version of .NET framework in 2002, and we did crazy stuff. We wanted to make that .NET name be pervasive, and so we just started renaming Microsoft products to .NET. So you might remember there was a Windows Server .NET that actually did not even contain .NET, which I laugh at. But as part of this .NET journey, we built .NET Compact Framework. We had .NET Framework. We built Windows Phone. We built Silverlight. There's the open source Mono. And then, of course, I like to make fun of myself. There's two ways to be successful at Microsoft. One is to carry the name Scott, and the other one is to make a new .NET. And so I made a new .NET, in 2016 with .NET Core 1.0. And really, it was not to make another .NET. It was really the world's changed, and .NET needed to move to adopt to that. So we land to a point where today we're left with three primary .NETs: .NET Framework, .NET Core, and Mono, which empowers our Xamarin scenarios. For .NET Framework, the message I've been saying is we're done moving stuff from .NET Framework to .NET Core. 3.1, 3.0, and 3.1 was the last wave of moving tech from .NET Framework into .NET Core. And the next step for us is to take some of the Mono dependencies and remove them as well. So, for example, Mono has its own BCL, which is different than the .NET Core BCL, which means as you move an app between .NET Core and Mono, you see slightly different behavior, and we don't want that. And so we plan to merge these things together, and we're gonna call this .NET 5, because if you have .NET Core 4 and .NET Framework 4, that's kind of confusing. The future is .NET Core, or where .NET Core goes. And so our plan is to basically rename to .NET 5, and we'll just continue moving on from there. And .NET 5 is bigger than .NET Framework 4, and it kind of shows that the place to go for .NET is .NET. And so there's a bunch of cool things that come out of this. One of these is what I'm going to call single SDK. That means no matter any of those workloads on my earlier slide, web, cloud, desktop, mobile, IoT, and AI and gaming, all are built on one SDK. Now, we've learned with .NET Framework, we don't want to have an SDK that's like 100 gigs. And so by the time we get to .NET 6, you're going to find the .NET SDK is going to be super, super small. It's going to support class libraries and console apps and nothing else. And that's because it should be your choice of what you want on your machine for .NET. And so you'll basically do .NET new or .NET install MAUI or .NET install desktop or .NET install ASP.NET. And that will install the components required to build those types of apps, which means we don't have to have a huge monolithic .NET. All the app types are going to run on the same BCL. So whether it's Blazor, Xamarin, ASP.NET, desktop, they will all use the exact same BCL, and they're all going to use the exact same tool chain, which is the .NET New, .NET Run, .NET Build, .NET Restore, that tool chain. On top of all that, we think there's two big areas that we want to focus on. One is having awesome cross-platform native UI. This is being able to build an application one time with one project, and that app can run on Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, and maybe Linux. We want to have awesome cross-platform web UI. We have a bunch of these components today in the ASP.NET stack with Blazor, but we want to even take the Blazor tech into new places too. We want to have awesome cloud-native investments. We've all heard about containers and microservices and Kubernetes and Docker, and what can we, the .NET team, do to make those experiences way more awesome. And then, of course, continue to make .NET faster, make the size of your app smaller, better diagnostics, better services. And my hope is that when we end this, I like to think the .NET Framework 2 was kind of the pinnacle of its time. It let you build awesome desktop and web and services, and then the world changed a whole bunch. And now I think that when we get to the end of the 5.6 wave, we will have best-of-breed solutions for all those same types again in .NET. So let's talk about cloud-native investments. This is a fun area of mine. I mentioned earlier Linux is a bigger piece. So we want to offer awesome cross-platform development with WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. This means even though I'm on a Windows machine, I should be able to build awesome Linux applications in .NET that I can deploy to my servers. We want to make that inner loop of building a Linux app as fast as would be to build a Windows application. We want to make your microservices single file. We offer single file in 3.x, but it's kind of a hack solution. It's a real solution in .NET 5. And with C#9, we can reduce the amount of junk you have to write to actually write a microservice. And I'm going to demo that in a little bit. And then I think probably the most exciting thing here in this space is one of the things that we learn as we start thinking of microservices is that .NET's I shouldn't say .NET. Visual Studio is not the most awesome tool for building apps that have 3 backends and a front end, and then maybe a Redis cache. Even though we have support for running multiple projects, it's not all great. So there's work we can do here with something we're going to call Project Tie. And then I'll skip the proxy. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. So big thing I want to highlight here is notice that something called top-level programs. And this is a C# program here that just has it using and then hello world. There's no main, there's no boilerplate around this. It's very simple. So let me do a couple demos, and I will apologize. One of the things that at Build I had access to was I had 5 computers in my room, and I was switching between them. That's kind of hard to do on a Zoom call. We are a version or two away of things being in a state where I can do it all on my same machine. And so I'm going to do some videos for a few of these just because I don't want to do machine swaps. So the first one that I want to do is I want to show this one, which is a scenario of us building applications on Linux. So I'm going to do File New here. I'm going to select I want to build an ASP.NET Core web app, and I'm going to call it Web App Linux here, and I'll press Create. And it's a regular Razor application. I could enable Docker here now. I'm not going to, because I want to show you can do it without Docker. And so here I am in a regular Razor Page app. I'm gonna go into my folder here, open up the main file here, put an H2 in here, and I'm gonna just blast the OS version, environment.os version to the screen here, and I'll run this under IS Express like it normally works. And here we go. And you can see it's showing that I'm running Windows 10 194.41. Now what we've done new here is I have an extension installed where I can come up here and drop down, and now there's WSL2 sitting right there. Windows Subsystem for Linux 2. This is shipped in Windows 10 2004 that just shipped. And now I can click here, accept the certs. And just in a second, Kestrel launches. And now you can see that I'm running on Linux. And so that same inner loop that you just saw before on Windows, just as fast on Linux on my machine here. I can put a breakpoint in my Razor page. We run the debugger through WSL2 as well. And so 5, the breakpoint will hit, and you can see that that is just super fast. That restart was amazingly fast. And so our goal is to make this just as fast as building a Windows app. Now, maybe you do want to build containers. We have really worked on making our container support much better in the recent tools. So I'm going to choose Linux here. And when this comes up, I can come here. Here's my Docker file. We only add the Docker file. We used to add a different project. Now we just add the Docker file. And you can see that here's the base image I'm going to build my app on. And if you look in the background, it's already building. And now I'm going to go use an SDK image to go compile the app and copy it into the container with that base image at the very top there. So this lets us build you the smallest container size we can do. Once again, the same inner loop tools just work as they were before. I can control F5, accept the cert, press yes. And now I'm running on WSL on Docker. And so I can actually do a Docker ps-a, and you can see there's my app running in a container. And once again, WSL2 makes even the Docker experience a much better experience on top of Windows. So this is something we hope to have in preview really, really soon. I didn't run this on my local machine because it requires .NET 5. And .NET 5 preview 5 screws up the SSL certs of the machine. So if I did this demo, it actually breaks my box and I have to go delete some certs and stuff like that. So I didn't want to do that. Next thing I want to show is I'll do one more video and then we'll switch to my machine. I'll do a demo of my machine. This is top level programs in C#. Once again, requires a hacked up VS. So I'm not going to do that on my main box. But look here at this application. It's just basically that same thing you saw on the slide. There's a using and a console write hello world. And you can literally write C# applications in this many lines of code. It's not fake. I can run it. It'll actually run. And then, of course, if I really wanted to, I can make it even smaller, down to one line. And so it's kind of the first time we've ever been able to build one line kind of C# applications here. And it'll run again. And it's fine. Now I can make it a little cooler if I go to my CS_proj file here, and I'm just going to add .web on the end of this to turn this into a web application versus a console application. And I'll nuke this and just delete some of the white space here. And I have an entire ASP.NET Core microservice sitting right here. And you can see that in under 20 lines of code, I can have a microservice written in .NET. And so this compares very favorably to some of the other tech like Node.js that feel like they might have a better getting started experience. But there you go. It actually serves web, so it's real. And so this is an area that you're going to see us invest in C#9. I'd love to get us to a point, it's not a C#9 feature, but I would love to get us to a point where you could even have a single file .NET application where there is no CS_proj and we just run the CS_proj or run the .cs file directly, giving you a great scripting experience. Now, in the microservice world, there's another cool part of this as well, which is I'm going to call this single file. And so what I've got here is I've got the new Windows terminal, and it lets me have multiple tabs. So I've got one tab in a 3.1 folder, and I've got one tab in a 5.0 folder. And what I'm going to do here is I'm using tech we have today. So notice this is a .NET Core 3.1 project, and I'm going to publish it. And notice I say publish single file true. You can use this today. We do a hacking method on it to make it work in 3.1, but it does work. And then I can also tell it I want another feature, which is published trimmed equals true. And that tells us to try to link away any parts of .NET that this application does not use. Now, because I'm making a single exe, I need to choose. Is it a Linux exe? Is it a Mac exe? Is it a Windows Win x64 exe? And so I have to publish it the RID, which is Win x64. So if I run this, you can see that my machine is updated since the last time I did this. It's going to run here. Give it just a second. There we go. And if I come over here to look, let's go jump into here. In my publish folder, and I get a 45 meg self-contained application. This does not require .NET Core to be on the machine. Everything has been dropped into the single exe. It's got a little per start performance problem because we kind of stuck the whole app into the single exe, and it actually uncompresses it into a folder and runs it from the folder. So it's not perfect, but it's also not bad. And plenty of people have built desktop apps of this with 3.1 and been very happy. Now, I've got a preview over here as well of .NET 5. And so it looks exactly the same, except I'm doing a trick here. I'm running .NET because I have a version of .NET 5 sitting in a folder here. So I can specify the exact version that I want and pass the same parameters. This is the same app. This is basically a .NET New Web application. Let's give this a second here. And so what I'm doing here is the linker is a little smarter in the .NET 5 world. And notice it is warning me that when I optimize for size, that could break things. Because if you're using reflection to load assemblies, we can't see that. And the app might not run. And so you have to be aware when you do these types of things. And so let's go back up here. Let's go into single file 5.0. And now notice 17 megs. So we literally took 30 megs out of the size of your application. So if any of you are getting jealous because people are saying that Go is super small, I'm showing you that you can do the same kind of thing in .NET Core. And I should be able to even go wrong terminal. I should be able to come into here, and that 17 meg exe should actually run. It's not fake. Go to my browser, and so with 30 megs less stuff in it, I can still run this application. There you go. So I'm super excited about this. And this is a space that we're going to continue to work in and get better at, helping you with tools to let you know as you start adding NuGet packages and stuff, what is the cost of the application. Now, I want to show the most exciting part of this tech that I've got here, and this is Project Tie. And so for this scenario, what I've got here is, if I just open up VS Code, I've got your typical multi-part application here. You can see if I scroll up, I've got a front end, a back end, and in VS Code, this is super hard to do. If I want to run this application, I would probably go back to my terminal. I've got this in a folder here. I would do a .NET run. Oops. or I could run it directly from the from VS Code. But VS Code wouldn't know what to run because there's too many projects. Give it a second here. So there my app is. Copy this. Paste it over here. And then of course it crashes because it didn't run the back end. To really run it, I need to know to go run the back end as well. If you're in Visual Studio, you can set this to run multiple projects. But even running multiple projects, there's a pile of challenges with this, and I'll show those now. So now that I've got the back end running, I should be able to come over here, and now it all runs. But there's a better way of doing this. So I'm going to stop that. Let's stop this one. There we go. And I want to talk about TIE. And so Project TIE, if I want to do that, I can just do something like TIE run. And so what's going to happen when I type TIE run, TIE is a new command line tool that we built, and it's going to go scan the folders on my machine and find all the CS projects that are sitting under there. And so obviously, if you look back at my VS Code, I had the front end project, the back end project. So TIE went and found both of those and ran them. And now notice it didn't print the URI out. It did, but I'm not going to care about those. What it did is it's going to give me this dashboard. And so if you're really running a multi-project system, you really need an easy way to find the URIs of each of the apps that are running. You might want to find the logs of all the apps that are running. You might want to see the health monitoring of all the apps that are running. And so TIE is going to give you a dashboard that does this for you. And so notice that it found two projects. It found the front end and the back end project. It knows that they're CS projects. It calls them projects, and it gives you a source of the CS project file. And then, of course, if I look over here, I can click on my front end and see some of the metrics. This will show me some of the health monitoring that we have in .NET, all available for this project. I can click back over here. I can go look at the logs. It'll show me the logs for the project. And so the dashboard ends up being a pretty useful tool. Now, if I click this, I'm going to fail still. And that's because the front-end project did not know how to find the back-end project. And this is where TIE can really, I think, really add some value for you. And so let me close that tab out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my app here. And let's go in the front-end project. And I'm going to go into the CS proj. And I'm going to uncomment a package. Now, this is the package right now. I can even stop that too. It's a package right now, but you can imagine this being built in. And what this is some extensions to the .NET Core configuration system to enable some TIE scenarios. So one of the other things that TIE does is when it boots up each project, it takes the ports from all the other projects and injects them as environment variables into the running process, which then enables us to go and write code like this. Notice today, I hard coded to 22299, which is going to change if I run this in a container. It's going to change if I run it in Kubernetes. It's going to change if I run it in Azure Kubernetes Service. But I can comment that out. And now I can just basically say, hey, configuration, get me the service URI for backend. Because we know that project was called backend. And so that's the term used to reference it. So if I save that, now I can come back over here. And we can TIE run again. And now because our front-end project is going to go get the environment variable injected into it from the back-end project, and that code's written, now I can easily do that port mapping. So never do you get to the point, again, where you're struggling with VS or struggling with any of our tool chains, trying to make sure all your config files have ports that map and stuff like that, which, as I said, will change when you publish to production environments. So now my front-end just works. Awesome. But I can do other cool stuff here as well. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to stop and I'm going to say TIE init. Notice there was no configuration file when I ran TIE because it can basically go look at your folder and figure out what those projects are by itself. If I run tie init, that will drop a configuration file into my application with the same stuff that you just already saw. Hey, I'm going to build a microservice. It's got a front end and a back end based on the names of the folders. And then I point to the actual CS proj that I want to actually run. Now, what if I wanted to go add a cache to this application, a Redis cache? I've got a couple of choices. I could go find a Redis port that runs on Windows installed on my machine. Yuck. Maybe I go find a Redis Docker container and I go run that on my local machine. Well, that's okay. Now I need to write Docker files and I need to learn the command line to go boot that thing up to keep it running. Well, with tie init or with tie, what I can do here is I've actually got I'm going to just grab this. I can just go stick a little bit of configuration into my file here. So what I've done is I said, I want to call this one Redis. And instead of doing a project, I'm now doing an image. That means go get a container. And then because this is a cache, a Redis cache, I need to tell Redis what port I want it to boot up on and kind of give it a connection string. Now in this case, I want to run Redis twice. I'm going to run once as my cache. I'm going to run it again as a monitor so I can get logging on the cache. So let's save that. And when I do that, I need to go back in to my CS proj, and now I'm going to go add an extension to our caching system using the Stack Exchange Redis client, restore that. And now I can take my application and use some dependency injection to inject the Redis cache into DI. And once again, I don't know the port. I just tell it get connection string Redis. That's the benefit of tie, is no longer worrying about ports and stuff. Let's let tie do that for you. And then the final piece here is I can come up into my pages here, and what I want to do is I'm going to uncomment this code. And what that does is says distributed cache, give it a name, and we say we want to basically last for 5 seconds. And so this is a tag helper that runs in Razor, and anything inside of this tag helper will be cached into my Redis instance for about 5 seconds. So I can save that, and I should be able to go back out to my application here, and I can do a tie run again, and it's going to be a little different when it runs. Okay, the dashboard is back up. Now you notice it says running Docker command. So containers are now running. I didn't write any Docker files. I can go right back up to my dashboard. I can refresh it here. And now notice that I don't just have projects, I now have containers. And this is the container image that we chose to use for those things. And so now my project has got a front end, a back end. It's got a Redis container with a cache and a port, and it has a Redis container running again to provide logs. So, I can click to view those logs, and you can see there's not a lot of stuff in the log right now. But what I can do is I can go back to my dashboard here. Let's click the front end. Now I'm pressing F5 in my browser. Notice the numbers they're changing about every 5 seconds. There you go. If I go back to the dashboard and I go look at my cache, now there's tons of stuff here from the cache hits that are occurring on the Redis client. So without installing Redis on my machine, without running a Docker file, I'm able to build a multi-project microservice application in .NET Core that just works. There's a couple more fun flavors of this as well. I can go back to my command prompt. I can press stop. And I can do things like docker run dash dash, not docker run, tie run dash dash help. And one of the options I have when I do a tie run is I can run everything as containers. So I could do tie run -- Docker. And now, even those CS projects are going to be wrapped up in a container, and they're going to run. And this is kind of getting your app to a point where you're really mimicking how you would run in something like Kubernetes, where everything's running in a container, and you're good to go. And I'll show you why this is cool in a second. I can go back to my dashboard. Notice the dashboard had project. Now, if I refresh the dashboard, everything is a container. The app runs just like it ran before. All the ports map through all those containers. Just work perfect. And now I can be at a point where I've tried it like this, and I'm actually ready to go push this thing out to the Azure cloud using Azure Kubernetes Service. So how would I do that? I can go back here. We'll stop this. I can go back to my tie file, my YAML file here, and I can stick one more piece in here, which I've got stuck down here. And I can go point a container registry up here. And so now what I've done is I've given this, it's got a name, it's now got a registry, and it's got my services. And now from command line, I could come back over here and I'll just do tie by itself. Notice there's a tie deploy. I could literally just do tie deploy, and it would take the 2 Redis caches and the 2 CS projects, put them all into containers, put them all up in the registry, at which point I could just pull those from Azure Kubernetes Service, and I'm running in the cloud. And once again, even though Kubernetes Service is going to remap all the ports and stuff like that, because of the way tie works, the app doesn't have to be changed, the config files don't have to be changed, because it's dynamically going to hook all that stuff up. And this is kind of the culmination of what we're trying to do from a .NET perspective from microservices. Easier development on Windows with WSL2. Awesome small single exes for running your microservices. And then Project Tie to take all these applications, run them together, hook them together, and be able to easily publish them as a single entity. And so I think this is going to be some exciting stuff. You can try this today. It's in our GitHub repos, and it'll ship, probably a little bit after the .NET 5 time, because right now it's kind of experimental. We want people to try it, give us feedback on how to make it better. We'll obviously have a Visual Studio experience for it as well, so I'm super excited about that. The next one that's kind of exciting to me is cross-platform native apps. This is something .NET developers have been asking for forever. And I think we finally have the right pieces to put together a pretty good story here. And so our thinking here is we introduced .NET multi-platform app UI, or as we like to say, .NET MAUI. And what this really is it's a cross-platform native UI, Windows, Mac, Android, iOS. Unlike the Xamarin projects that we had before, this has a single project. You don't have to have an iOS project, an Android project, a Windows project, and a shared class library. You actually write all this in a single project, so it's much simpler. From that single project, you right-click on it and say deploy to this device or that device, and that'll just work. This is technically an evolution of Xamarin Forms, taking all the lessons we've learned over the last couple of years with Xamarin Forms to build an easier and simpler to use platform. And it's going to be targeting .NET 6. Our first preview of this will happen around the .NET 5 RC. When we do the .NET 5 RC, we'll open up our .NET 6 branch, and this will be available in there. You might ask, what does this look like? This will be system.ui instead of Xamarin.forms. It'll be system.devices or a name like that instead of Xamarin.essentials. And then for your file new, it'll be file new, multi-platform app UI, or from the CLI, .NET new MAUI. So for the first time ever, you'll be able to build Xamarin projects from the command line. And then even the regular Xamarin projects are going to be renamed. So it's just .NET for iOS, .NET for Android, back to that one .NET story. I want to make it feel like a single platform. And you can see .NET New iOS, .NET New Android, all doing that CLI stuff here. So I've got 2 quick demos of that, and then we'll show my crazy demo. So 2 of these that I have. This is the Mac version of this, and this will show an experience we've never done before. I can do a make dir MAUI to create a folder. I'll jump into that folder, and for the first time ever, for a Xamarin project, I can do it from CLI, .NET New MAUI. Now I will say the bits are a tad hacked. I have to do a NuGet restore versus a .NET restore to make this work. But that's just because we're prototyping right now, and this tech's not 100% done. So now that I've done that, I can launch VS Code. Once again, first time you can get a VS Code experience for a Xamarin style project. We'll jump in here, and I want to call out something really cool here. If you look at this markup is not using XAML. One of the options we're going to give you in MAUI is the ability to build applications using C# MVU style. So my entire UI is built out of C#, but I can run this as normal. In VS Code, go over FM11, 13.4, and then I'll pop open the iOS emulator on the Mac. Give this a second, and my icon will show up in the emulator. And this app has all of our hot reload, hot restart technology inside of it, which is really, really cool. So there it is running. And it's a typical Blazor style kind of app. Press the button, the value increments. Where this gets cool is here I am in VS Code, and all I'm going to do is go up to, you can see the code running when I press the button. But what I want to show is this hot reload, hot restart model here. So I'm going to say, let's center that label. And notice label just moved on the screen. I didn't refresh or anything like that, didn't recompile. Let's change the label to pink. It just changes to pink. Let's change it back to black. It just changes back to black. Maybe I want to go and change some C# code. So let's go change that ++ to a -. And when I do that, I can just go over here and click the button. It goes down now. And of course, we should fix the button too. Let's go change that text to a -, and the button turns into a -. And so you can see how fast the inner loop is on this. And that's what excites us is you give this awesome C# MVU style markup, hot reload, hot restart. We think it's pretty exciting. So let me close this one out. I'll do one more video, and then we'll go back to my machine and show some crazy stuff. This is MAUI in a Visual Studio project. So I've got my file new here. Just like we said before, multi-platform app UI.net. I'm going to close that and just go to a project I already have that runs. And I do want to say that don't be freaked out when I show the C# MVU code. We still, of course, are going to support all the XAML that we've had today. So we want to make this as compatible as possible. So you'll be able to basically take the XAML that you're used to. And it'll work the same way it always has. And so you get 2 choices here, XAML or that new MVU style C# that we have. Now what's cool here is I want to show something new, which is I want to be able to have a very fast inner loop, no emulators, no devices. So I'm just going to click run on Windows, and we're just going to run the app natively on Windows. So you can see all the regular diagnostic tools boot up, and there's my MAUI app, .NET MAUI app running directly on Windows, just like you would expect. There you go, it just works. And so, we think this is a critical part of the system is being able to, use the native platform. That's one of the options for your UI. And then, of course, one of my favorite features that a lot of folks aren't aware that we released is our support for just being able to plug a device in and make it work. So in this case, I'm going to plug my iPhone directly into my laptop here. And when I do, I've not done anything special. I do have iTunes on my machine. It's required to talk to the iPhone, but the iPhone's just going to show up in the list. I didn't pay Apple any money to make this work. I don't have a Mac anywhere near me, and I can basically just run the application. There's that deploy, and I'll deploy it to my iPhone. I've got Reflector running on the bottom of the screen here. I'll open it up. This lets me mirror my phone to the screen. And here I am on my iPhone, and the app is just running just like it was locally. And so, number one, you can run without an emulator on the local device. But if you want to go, plug a device in, just plug the device in super quick. The cool thing about this hot reload, hot restart is if I make a change in the C# or the XAML, I don't have to recompile the whole app and fire it back to the device. We just diff the change over to the device, and you get that same fast interloop. So we're trying to make that awesome. But my favorite feature here is this single project. You saw this run both on Windows and on my iPhone. And so this is a single project that has a couple of new nodes. One is it's got a resource node where I would stick things like images and fonts and stuff like that that are shared across all my projects. You can see I've got my favorite .NET bot here that's in my applications. I've got a couple of TrueType fonts. But once again, instead of having multiple projects, the hope is that we can take these new nodes and make them as common places that you can stick resources and code for particular platforms. And so resources are cool, but the fancier one is this platforms, and right here, I can open it up and look here, I've got Android, iOS, and Windows. And inside of there, that's where I would put my code that calls platform native UI or platform native functionality. So if I need to talk to an Android, piece of code or an iOS piece of code, I can do it in there. And so we add all this together. We think we can give you faster interloops, less emulators, hot reload, hot restart, and C# style MVU. We think all that added together is some pretty cool stuff. Now I want to do one more demo and show what if we took this to an even further stage. And this is the notion of what I call a hybrid app. And this is an area that we're exploring as a team. And as we do the Maui project, the .NET Maui project, you'll see us talk more about this. This is a Xamarin Forms app. So if I run this, it's going to be a native application. And it kind of does what you would expect. Cool. What if I could do this? And this is pretty snazzy here. I'm going to undo this. And I'm going to put a Blazor web view inside of my native application. I'll run this again. And so now I've actually mixed the modes where I've got both native UI and I have web UI all in the same application. You might not believe me this is real. So let's do something like this. I want to show that this web app still knows how to run C# just like it should because it's Blazor. And I could do something like do an add I. And so here I've mixed the both worlds together. And this enables scenarios where you want to share, and you can see that really is real web UI up here with native UI, all in the same application. And this is, we find that some developers are now writing some web UI that they would like to share across apps across multiple platforms because it's easy to make web UI that looks good across all the platforms. And so we want to enable that with Maui and Blazor. Now, that's kind of interesting. Let's take it up a notch. So what I've got here is I'm going to basically uncomment this. And now I've got, notice at the top of my file here, we're injecting the current state. That's the state of that button. And so you can see here in my native code, when I call the onClick, it calls increment count on that. In my web UI, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to basically grab that variable from the native code, and I'm going to call that increment count as well. And so if I run this app again, now I've got my native UI and I've got my web UI, and they talk to each other. If I press the button on either side, the variables update across the board. And we can go so far that I could go even further, and I could just decide to inject an entire Blazor app into my native application. And we did this in a demo that I don't have time to show today, where what we actually did, the other benefit of this app, so now here's my desktop UI with a full Blazor app running inside of it, and notice it's still hooked together. And so the one of the cool aspects of these types of applications is this app also has access to the native platform. And so the Blazor app, if it wanted to, can actually call and talk to native hardware in an Electron style kind of format. And so we think this is a interesting place as well. And you'll hear more about this later in the year as we get closer to announcing some of the .NET MAUI stuff. But that's a demo that nobody's seen before. You're the first people that have actually shown that to outside of Microsoft, so enjoy that. And then of course, we have previews of .NET 5 out today, where you'll see some of these cloud native improvements. You see the size on disk. There's a bunch of perf improvements. Project High is out there available to try today as well. And then .NET MAUI preview will be out probably around September. What about UWP? That's a question I get all the time. If you're a UWP developer and you're asking when is UWP coming to .NET Core, it's not. The Windows team has built WinUI, which is their future flavor of UWP. And it's a much simpler model. It doesn't require all the sandboxing and stuff of UWP. It also works on all Windows 10 versions, and it supports .NET 5 and C++, and they have previews available now. It's always fun to talk about my schedule. We now ship .NET every November, and then every other year is an LTS release, meaning it's a long-term support release. So you can see that .NET 5 will be this November, and then next November we'll ship .NET 6. That'll be our long-term support. Each of these long-term supports is good for 3 years. And so if you want to go slow, wait for these and move on these. If you want to go fast, just go down the entire path. It's predictable, it's easy. Final thing before I can take some questions, we have .NET Conf 2020. This is our virtual online event for .NET that we do every year, kind of our mini .NET build. And it'll be the launch event for .NET 5. And it'll be 3 days, about half Microsoft and about half the community. And so that's what I wanted to show today. And so I will stop sharing and take a couple questions. I see there's stuff in the chat. I love the feedback from Keith about Ty looks awesome. We have homegrown tools to run multiple projects. As I said, hope to have this tech in VS as well, so you can do it right from VS too. WCL 2, if you haven't upgraded to Windows 10 build 2004, it is amazing fast. Both from two standpoints. It's fast, and just opening the WCL 2 window and running code. It also Docker for desktop now supports WCL 2 as well, and it makes running containers on Windows 100 times faster. I say, yeah, I'm still waiting for the update to be available on your machine. I will send you a link where you can actually go force that on your machine. You don't have to wait. Right now, the waiting process could take months. There's a URI you can go to actually just tell it to do it now. What else do we have here? 1803. Wow, that is old.
Scott, is forcing the update safe?
The 2004 update?
Yes, yeah.
I've been running it for about 2 months now, so I jumped onto FastRing. I don't recommend FastRing for anybody. I jumped onto FastRing when I knew that the final build was done. So we were finished with 2004 about a month before it shipped. And so I jumped into FastRing for a quick week to get it. but I've been on it for quite a bit of time. Damian Edwards on my team, Scott Hanselman on my team, David Fowler, all of us have been on it for a while. So it seems pretty good to me. The cache tag helper is not new. That's actually been around for a bit. We did that work probably in version 2. Yes, how to debug with Thai? Yes, that work's still to be done. Debug still needs lots of work. I'm not. The C# MVU is inspired by. I'll put a couple links in here. James Clancy. .NET comment. And see if I can find this GitHub. The inspiration from the C# markup is a project called Comet. It's not meant to be a Swift UI. It's not meant to be a clone of Swift UI, but it is meant to. The one thing that we've noticed with things like Blazor is the binding syntax that we have in Blazor is easier, at least for me, than XAML binding. And so we wanted to find a way to bring that binding to Xamarin projects, and the C# markup is a way that we're looking at doing that. And we might even actually change C# features to make that the syntax easier. What else do we have here? How did that work? Is the phone USB connected to the laptop? Yes. To make that feature work, I will. Show folks how to make that feature work. I'm going to share my screen in 1 second. Okay. So I'll share my screen again. If you want to try the feature where you can just basically plug an iPhone into your computer, that works with the builds we have today. It does not require a new build of anything. And I'm going to share here. And what I've done here is I've basically gone to Tools Options. And there's a node in there called Preview Features. And notice that I've enabled Xamarin Hot Restart. And so just go check that box. Once you check that box, all you have to do is you have to have an Apple developer account, which are free. So just go to developer.apple.com, create the developer account, check the box here in Visual Studio, restart Visual Studio. It does require iTunes to be on the machine because that's how we talk to the actual device. But once you've done that, you don't have to actually use iTunes, just install it and tell it to go away. Once you've done all that, just plug your iPhone in. It'll just show up as a target. And if you press Control F5 or F5, the app will show up on the iPhone very, very quickly. And then the real cool thing there is the inner loop is amazing because when you change the code in Visual Studio or change the markup, we don't recompile the entire app and send it back to the device. We send just enough of it. We send the change set to the device. And so that inner loop is really, really fast. And like that a lot. Let's see what else was in here. Why Blazor and not a component using React? I think we will enable React in there as well. So the way we think of the hybrid applications is you might have a variety of different technologies and you might want to use them all. And so we don't want to force anything on anybody. And so we're going to enable React views and Blazor views and native tech that can all work together. And yes, debugging in Thai is complicated. Yes, that's interesting. Would there ever be a version of Thai that would blend declarative config of containers and manage resources? I don't know. When we first started off, there was a project inside of Microsoft that we looked at that actually did have declarative. You basically defined that you wanted to run in a container and stuff directly in your C#. Something we would look at. Yes, and somebody did get it to run on their Surface. You're welcome to ask a versioning question.
Yeah, it was me that's running it on my Surface. No problem so far. It's been great. Yeah, I have a question about versioning. So yeah, I think there's, just to say, great demo, Scott. I think there's ever been a better time to be a .NET developer. But one of the things we've seen in the transition from .NET Framework to .NET Core is, for very good reasons, the refactoring of the framework into many more and smaller packages. And we've also seen this, a huge sort of embracing of open source, and I think that's only naturally going to lead to an increase in the number of small for-one-purpose packages that are being released. I don't know if you've been following the sort of debate that sort of John Skeets led recently around the sort of versioning problems in .NET. It's sort of been an ongoing conversation, particularly that problem where you have two separate libraries or a project that you're writing in a library that both take a dependency on the same package. JSON.NET is a commonly cited example, where the way that .NET works means that kind of the most recent version wins and is the one that gets loaded in, and it exposes you to version conflict problems. I just wondered if that's something that that you are aware of, and if there is a plan, or how much there is a plan to do something to address that as .NET continues to evolve.
We are very well aware of that problem, James. I don't have a great solution today for that problem. Some technologies let you actually run multiple versions of the same thing at the same time, and that's a bunch of challenges. I think the real challenge we have with that is just the breakage that would occur by us making a change in that space. So I don't have a quick fix for that, but we are very well aware of the problem, and you can see the hacks we did, like the JSON.NET problem. We run our own JSON parser, comically enough, with James Newton King helping us. So yeah, we didn't pin the framework to a version of NewtonSoft, which then pinned all of the stuff downstream of the framework to a version of NewtonSoft. So that's an example where even we, did work to move away from that because of the problem. So I do know it is a problem, and we will keep thinking about it.
Yeah, and there were some nice sort of approaches, well, nice to read, I'm sure incredibly challenging to implement, that people have been proposing. I think it would be a great shame if all of the wonderful technical innovation that we're seeing on .NET started to suffer because we weren't sort of taking a pause and thinking, right, how can we prevent this ever becoming such a huge issue?
Yeah, we actually discussed this back when we shipped .NET, but even before .NET Core 1.0 shipped, this was a topic that. But I will acknowledge it and say we will continue to try to work on getting a better story there. Is there an ELL on VB.NET firm and fast, or is it possible to communicate force or rethink? There is no planned EOL of VB.NET. What we've done with VB.NET is we said we don't plan to innovate the language anymore. All we will do in the VB.NET space is make sure that it still can interoperate with modern C# code. And by the way, most of our VB.NET customers aren't asking for us to go do lots of crazy language additions. If you look at the stuff we've done in C# recently, I don't think that's in the flavor of VB, and so it would make VB complicated and confusing. And in .NET 5, you will see that we will enable like WinForms we will light up more of the scenarios for VB than we have in .NET Core 3.1, 3.0, and 3.1. So we're, the folks that have passion around that space, we plan to keep that stuff alive. We don't plan to get rid of it. We're loving Blazor. I have a couple projects in production. Are MS fully committed to Blazor for the future? Yes, I think we can say we're firmly committed to Blazor. There's no plans for us to move away from Blazor. Most of the stuff we moved away from was like plugin-y kind of stuff, which browsers kill plugins. Any chance we can get a sudo apt-get download core 5 for 32-bit ARM? I will talk to Richard. How can we get involved and try out MAUI now? You can't try out MAUI now. There is a GitHub repo, which I can paste a link in. It was in the deck. I can also send Dan Clark a link to the deck that he can share with all you folks. The challenge is we've asked ourselves, could we boot MAUI up on .NET 5 preview bits? But MAUI has breaking changes in it. We don't want to make people see the breaking changes twice, and that's why we're waiting right now. So we're using Polemy to tie replaces. Polemy is very different. Polemy is more of, I want to go describe my Azure resources or my cloud resources and have C# actually diff those and run those in the cloud. Tie is primarily about multi-project .NET applications running. So I think they're very, very different. I highly recommend Polemy. If you've ever used an Azure ARM file, your brain will implode and you want to go use Polemy right away. How do you see WinUI taking off in the fourth? I see some early traction with XAML Control Gallery and peeps like DevExpress helping out. I don't know. When it comes to WinUI, I think WinUI tries to fix a lot of the problems that UWP had, meaning that it's super constrained. Only certain versions of UWP worked on certain versions of Windows 10. So it feels like in many ways it's taking a .NET Core kind of style where you ship the libraries and the libraries are part of your application versus being part of the operating system. So I think it's a good direction for them. I think the real question when it comes to any of the UI techs like WinUI versus say WinForms or WPF is, does it have the right characteristics for you? WinUI or UWP wasn't good historically for building form style applications. And I don't know if WinUI is taking enough steps there to improve that. But we talk to that team all the time. We support them, and you saw their bits run on top of .NET 5. So we do care about that scenario. We are always working on perf, and Java Hotspot is actually really good, by the way. Even though we can beat Java in a lot of benchmarks and stuff. And yes, those are all things that we will work on. We are continually dialing which areas to focus on. There's also trying to do native code as well. But perf is now a part of the team, all up, and so you will not see us move away from perf. The most exciting thing for me moving forward is, for many years, .NET was broken up into pieces where there was a language team, and there was a runtime team, and there was the ASP.NET team, and they all didn't work super close together, and we merged all those teams back together into a single org. And so I think in C# 10 especially, you're going to start seeing us do language innovation at the runtime level, not just at the compiler level, and that's going to be very exciting. There's even features in C# today that are done at the compiler that can be much faster if done at the runtime. There's all other kinds of crazy things. If you run C# on Windows, we use the Windows structured exception handling, which cost us penalties on exceptions. Exceptions in Java are cheap. They're expensive in .NET because of that. Those are all things we're thinking of as well. So I think you're going to see, it's kind of one of the cool things about where we are with .NET is once we kind of get through this 5-6 wave. I think we have all the framework pieces, all the client pieces, and you'll see more work on the inner workings. But if you read some of the blog posts on .NET 5, you'll see a bunch of cool performance things we've done. So I unfortunately, I told Dan earlier, I need to bail. I could probably answer questions for 8 minutes if there's any other questions people will just want to verbally say, or if not, I'm happy to come back and just have a beer session in the future where we don't actually do slides and demos and just drink beer and tech.
That sounds awesome.
That sounds good to me.
I think we're all good with beer sessions. We like those. Are there any more kind of imminent questions, or I can just, all I can see now is beer in the chat. That's just kind of totally drawn my attention.
I'd love to ask that Thai question actually. Somebody was commenting about Thai and Pulumi, and I just wondered, I mean, Thai to me, as Jane, feels more like a development time tool, trying to solve the problem of developing multiple microservices. And it's something I've seen a lot in the past. You've seen those demos of Visual Studio publishing something into Azure or into a remote environment, and that always felt like cool, but not so useful, because you'd never do that in a real production scenario. You'd always want to run the approved pipelines, pull things from a source control and build them in the official place. So is that a correct interpretation here, that Thai is really for a development and not
that's a great interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, Pulumi is about creating your resources in the cloud and even changing them as you want to change. Thai is all about developer loop and making the developer loop better for multi-project applications.
Yeah, cool.
So have a good night, folks. And I will work with Dan Clark to find when I can come back and join one of your next sessions and just sit back with a beer and do beer.